All right, this is Piss and Vinegar Day 1. So it's kind of a play on words. It's an homage to Dorian Yates' early 90s with blood and guts training. If you've followed this channel at all, you know I'm a high intensity guy. I like to train with one set to failure. And, Dorian was kind of the father of that, Mike Benson being the great grandfather of sorts. So today is shoulders and biceps. So I'll be going through my session. I'll be discussing, different tips and tricks I'm doing throughout this session, and maybe talk about other stuff. I don't know. We'll see how this series plays out. So yeah, right now I'm just kind of warming up with the side delts, rear delts, front delts, getting that done. And that way everything's warmed up, pre-activated for the dumbbell shoulder press. And yeah, I prefer dumbbell shoulder press to barbell, although I do both. I think it's good to change variations a little bit. Otherwise, you're trying to progressively overload the same movement every single week. A lot of times you'll stall out. So to kind of override that, you want to switch out, a different kind of program in high intensity in a monthly basis. So like Dorian Yates used to train, the exact same thing every week. I'm cool with that, but I think the progress is a bit slow. Whereas I train, if it's shoulders, I'll do two different sessions back and back concurrently. So I'll do the dumbbell press, and then I'll do a barbell press, and then I'll do the dumbbell press. And I'll probably add more variations in the future just to keep things fresh. And that way, linear progression doesn't stall out as quick. But right now, I just have those two variations for the overhead press. So here I'm just warming up still. I'm not a huge advocate of warm ups. I do one or two warm ups, and then I get straight into the working weight. This is the working weight now. Hell, fucking super carb depleted right now. I'm doing a cut. I've been cutting for a long time. I suck at cutting. This is my first successful cut in for fucking years. So getting serious about the bodybuilding thing again with my very subpar genetics. And yeah, so not throwing around anything super heavy today. I think this is 34 kilos or 70 pounds for you Americans. Getting 8 reps. And this is to reiterate a point that I've told people many times before, but you'll see at the end here, I actually hit true failure. A lot of people, when they train high intensity, they think they hit failure, when in reality they hit their last rep they could do, but they didn't then go on to fail. So this here, most people would stop. They go, all right, that's enough. I'm not getting another one after this. And then you go again, and I might have actually got another one. I mean, I didn't, but there was a chance I could have. But that's actual failure. I actually physically failed. And then with these, I don't like drop sets on shoulder press as much. I mean, I do them, but I like to do a force rep first. So I'll rest, or rest pause rather. So I rested about 15, 20 seconds, which wasn't enough time. I think I needed about 30 seconds here. And yeah, I only got like 1.5 reps. So now I dropped it because I didn't get that many reps on the rest pause. But normally I would just do a rest pause. But yeah, I was fucking cooked. Didn't have enough in me to get any more reps on that rest pause. So I just did a drop set instead. And I only do one variation for front delts because front delts is already hit with your incline presses, your flat presses even. So I don't really do anything to isolate my front delts. I just now move straight onto side delts. And yeah, you can see me with my ugly face doing my side delts. A lot of people, they use too much momentum on side delts, and like you just keep using momentum, and you could get 100 reps if you just kept going with more and more momentum to get the reps. But I try to keep it as strict as I can. I rest at the bottom, that way I don't have any momentum, flinging it back up, no stretch reflex. And that way I can get to this point where, oh, I can't actually reach, I'm fighting, I can't reach. I never used to train my side delts like this, and thus I never developed any side delts. Now, I have still not got much side delt because my humerus kind of hangs out of the socket. I got very loose shoulder joints, so my shoulders kind of don't really pop. But I used to have like a fucking negative side delt, and it wasn't until I started just training one set to failure with actual like strict form that my side delts grew. Before I would do what everyone else does. I would just cheat. I would never really truly like have a parameter for what was a good rep and what wasn't. So if your side delts are lagging, try just one set to failure, or with a drop set. In this case, I do 3 sets essentially, but it's a drop set, and actually reach true mechanical failure. Get to the point where you can no longer get your humerus and your forearm horizontal to the floor, or parallel to the floor rather. And then I do a second variation unilaterally like this. I find this hits the side delt a little differently. Um, I don't know. I just like the extra cable tension. This way, I get tension throughout the entire way, and with the dumbbells, you get the tension at the top peak. So it's two different kind of moment arms and tension curves. So I just combine the two. It's probably overkill realistically, but I don't know. A lot of times with high intensity, you're trying to convince yourself that you're doing enough, and a lot of times you think, oh, we have this volume brainwashing where it's like, man, I need to do more, otherwise I'm not going to grow. When in reality, you can get away with so little and still grow. And at this point, it's just overkill. But I'm doing it because mentally it makes me feel better about it. Otherwise, I feel like I haven't done enough, even though I know deep down I have. And with these ones, I think it's best to bend your elbow a little bit. I find when I straighten my arm entirely, I find with any side delt movement, if you straighten your arm entirely, personally, my traps get involved more. And for other people, it might be the absolute opposite. They might find if they straighten their arm. So, it's a very individual thing with side delts. You have to kind of fuck around and figure out what works for you specifically. It could be pronating your fingers so that, you get a bit of internal rotation. It could be externally rotating for your delts. Like we all have different insertions, different anatomies. So yeah, with these, nothing, none of this is set in stone. This is just what I do. You gotta fuck around and find out. Essentially, all that matters is you take one set to failure. Everything else is a matter of your anthropometry, what allows you to feel your mind muscle connection for you individually. So yeah, I just do forced reps on these. I like unilateral movements because you can do forced reps. You don't need a partner. And if you're a friendless fuck like me, or you don't have any friends nearby that train, you can actually start giving yourself forced reps. So that's a good little trick. Is if you're a high intensity guy. So now I'm doing bicep curls. Now mostly strict here. You notice that when I curl, I bring my elbows back for the first part of the movement. And the reason I do that is because if you don't, you get the front delt activated the most because you have this long moment arm where you're kind of without, like, there's no way you can totally isolate unless you do a preacher curl, which I don't like preacher curls. So when you do these standard curls or standing curls with a bit of English, but a little bit of body English, you can still feel entirely the bicep if you just bend the elbows a little bit at the start, and then you can move them forward a bit at the top to really squeeze at the top of the biceps. But that's just what works for me. Again, all these things, everyone's a little bit different, but you might find for you, if you bring your elbows back temporarily at the start of the movement, you'll feel it a bit more in your biceps and less in your anterior delt, which I used to feel heavily. I could barely feel my biceps at all until I started bringing my elbows back for a second. Then I drop set it with a close grip, just changing the grips up a little bit just to get slightly different stimulation on the different bicep heads. Probably didn't make a big difference, but just did it anyway. Slightly more supinated. And again, as per all my workouts, I have different variations. So on a different day, I would do a strict wall curl with no momentum. Today, I'm using a bit of momentum. Just a day. And now I'm doing reverse curls. I find these are the best for your brachyradialis and brachialis or brachialis. Um, Doing these seriously grown my brachyradialis. I didn't used to have a brachyradialis. I was all flexors. So this is really just great for the extensors and the brachyradialis. I don't really like hammer curls because they don't totally get the forearm component, and they still don't really quite get the brachialis either. So this is what works for me. I like these. They fucking kill, especially when you do this, 3 to 5 second negative tempo that I do. At the end there, it starts to go out of the window because it's just so fucking difficult. And then again, with certain movements, you can cheat rep in order to get, some force reps that you'd otherwise not get since you train alone. If you train alone, looking a bit juicy there. And then I follow this. I finish this up with the concentration curl. I like these. I have a bicep imbalance. My right bicep's quite a bit bigger than my left, and on the contrary, my right tricep's quite a lot smaller than my left. So I like to do a bit of unilateral work, and again, this way I can do those force reps with my other hand, and I just get a 6 stretch. Really concentrate on that one muscle at a time. It's probably overkill. You could probably just get away with that one bilateral movement, but psychologically this is good for me. And it's brutal getting these extra force reps or force negatives. Switch to the other arm. And when you do these concentration curls, you don't want to have your elbow up. I see people do this. They have their elbow up on their quad, and that totally defeats the purpose. You can't get that bicep stretch. You don't get that passive insufficiency at the bottom. You want to have your humerus, the back of your humerus, resting on the inner thigh, not on the top of your quad. That way you can really hit that bicep better. And again, all these exercises are swapped out next week with different variations of bicep curls. Again, just to keep the progressive overload a bit more consistent rather than trying to push an extra rep or extra weight every single week. If you're stalling out in your training, I'd highly suggest doing that. I think it's undulation or concurrent sort of training where you're switching out exercises. And now for this last one, I just do for supraspinatus and infraspinatus, getting my rotator cuffs strong. A lot of people do these kind of pussy banded shit with lots of reps in reserve. I don't dig that. I think it's a small muscle, sure, but all muscles should just be trained one set to failure. And by doing this, my shoulders have become far more bulletproof. I've just training these external rotations. And I got this from a guy called, you probably heard of him before, Knees Over Toes guy. I saw him doing these, and I'm like, cool, I'm going to do this, but I'm going to do it with high intensity. And I do a lot of these kind of prehab, rehab type of movements that I'd otherwise not previously do because they're fucking boring. Doing 4 sets of 20, because it's always these movements are always like high reps. Just get them activated. No, get them fucking strong and get them big. And there will be aesthetic purposes to this too. These infraspinatus, this supraspinatus, all these rotator cuff muscles, they push out your rear delts, they push out your traps, they push out your rhomboids to an extent. So, they're important for health. They're important for looking jacked and stacked. So yeah, I'd highly suggest adding a set to failure of these controlled external rotations. You don't want to do these willy-nilly because again, it's a small muscle. You don't want to injure them. You can tear rotator cuffs pretty easy. Do it controlled and take it to failure, and you'll have some dynamite maybe not dynamite. Fuck it, dynamite shoulders. You'll have some dynamite shoulders. Safe, healthy shoulders. And that's it. This workout probably took me about 15, 20 minutes. That's a typical high intensity session, and you're done. So that's day one. Stick around for coming high intensity sessions. Peace.